Thursday, November 11. Welcome to Co-Create My City. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this session this morning about... So today we're going to hear more about the opportunities in the exciting field of biogas.
Waste residues valorization here in South Africa. It's a collaboration with, let's say, the South African partners and also with the Netherlands. So within this project we have already been working in Cape Town, and now we will also continue here in Johannesburg. So this is a very exciting moment in time and also a very needed moment in time that we are here together. In Glasgow, our prime ministers or ministers of environment, they are discussing now climate change, yes, and they have very enormous plans, yes. I mean, what everything they want to do, it is very challenging. But something also needs to be done. Can produce energy, yes, when it has no other use, and there the biogas is part of it. At the same moment, we also want to reuse our resources as much as possible, and that's the environment in the Netherlands when we talk about biomass. This is how we look at, let's say, renewable energy over the last, let's say, 20 years. And so when I started working on renewable energy, you see it was this very low green in 1990, this very low green pillar means we only had bioenergy that was produced at that moment. So that was the big, and there was of course a little bit other renewables, but it was very minor. Over in the course of time till today, let's say 2020, you can see that the yellow line, solar, is growing, and also the blue line is growing. But the bioenergy always has been the main resource of renewable energy in our country. That will change, yes. Next year, let's say, wind energy and solar energy will surpass the bioenergy in the Netherlands. And that's okay, yes, because they produce a lot of cheap electrons, so let them do that. We can do something else, isn't it? So that's why we have also need the bioenergy. So we are at this moment actually at about 11% of renewable energy in the Netherlands. And bioenergy really is, let's say, can be developed in a lot of different ways. So originally we just started with just heating with biomass. So that's what people do at home when they burn some wood. We started then in the 90s with waste incinerators in the Netherlands. That is the orange part, energy from waste. And actually all our waste is at this moment is used, and in very efficient waste incinerators it is converted into electricity and heat. And in the big cities like Rotterdam, The Hague, but also Amsterdam, we use this waste heat to heat our cities. Then since all the time we also have developed biogas, and as you can see it has been growing steadily, but we still expect in the year 2030 a major growth over the next years in the Netherlands also with biogas, because we consider that as clean. We also see that combined heat and power is part of, let's say, the energy production. And then the black dots, they are going up and down. That's the co-firing of biomass. So between the year 2003 and 2013, we have been supporting co-firing of biomass. So we then had the co-firing of biomass. And since 2 years, we started with that again. Up to a maximum of 25 petajoules, so that is also part of, let's say, the renewable energy production in the Netherlands. But we will close that in 2030, because in the Netherlands we will have no longer coal-fired power plants in the year 2030. So it's about the biorefinery, using our resources in an efficient way, and then on the right-hand side, use the waste for products, and of course what cannot be used for products, we use that for energy. So biogas, of course, is an important part of, let's say, this overall picture, as I have just shown. And the biogas can be used in different ways. It can be used in the gas engines, but it can also be used for green gas. So this is a kind of renewable gas system that we see, let's say, in the future as, let's say, where we want to go. So it's about renewable electricity. So that's just the electrons that can come from solar and wind. But of course, it's intermittent, so somehow we have to store it. We can store it in hydrogen, or we can also go through methane and store it. We also have the biogas coming from a lot of different resources. We also can produce even more wet biomass through microalgae. It all goes in the anaerobic digester. If we go to the upgrading, through power to gas, we can also do the methanation, and so we have then the, let's say, methane available in our gas grid, and we have the renewable electricity available in our electricity grid. So that's the future picture we see for biogas in the Netherlands. So this is an example of what of a plant. So this is in Overijssel. It is about a 10 megawatt plant. And in this site, it's actually a waste, Twens is a waste treatment site. They collect organic waste and also animal manure, agro-residues, and they mix that, and then they produce from that the biogas. And whatever is left, it can either be sold as let's say, digestate as a fertilizer, or it can also be if it's cannot be sold, it can be used in the waste incinerator. We also have the co-digestion out on the farm level. So this is, let's say, a big plant at Aben, but we also have one at Grootzever. So several of these plants that are available in the Netherlands where manure and the co-substrate are, let's say, mixed together in the digester to produce the biogas, and then it is upgraded to methane as well. So there are different ways we do it, and there are a lot of companies also in the Netherlands that are able to help you, let's say, for this realizing this plant. So this is also a waste treatment plant. It is in Wijster in the north of the Netherlands, and actually originally it's very much like what is happening here in Johannesburg, because originally the waste was going to the landfill site, so they were using the landfill gas to produce electricity and heat through the gas engine, and they added, let's say, a digester to it, so that, let's say, they could sort waste and bring it to the digester, but also collect it as separated organic waste. And of course also the cow dung could be added as well. So that's really a plant that already has been in operation for production of biomethane since 1989 through pressure swing absorption. So that was the old technology. And nowadays we have the membrane technology to produce the biomethane. And that has been added already about 8 years ago. So this is really what we see as the total production. You can see it is 2,100 normal cubic meter per year. So a lot of different systems are there and have been realized. So this is a kind of the overall view. I don't know if you like data and figures, but but on the left hand side you can see the source for the biogas. So it is the landfill. Yes, it's still, we have a little bit of biogas coming from the landfill side. It's the sewage sludge, yes, so next to the wastewater treatment plant, the sewage sludge digesters. And then we have the co-digester or municipal waste digesters, where you can see most of the, let's say, waste is going to these digesters. And then part of that is going to the combined heat and power plant, part of that is converted into green gas, and part of that is also used in the transport sector for mobility. So actually at this moment we have about 142 million normal cubic meter of biomethane production in the Netherlands. And these are, let's say, the installations we have. So all over the country we have installations that are available and that can produce, and 38 of them produce then the biomethane. So this is also a nice example, and I think it could also be an example for here in Johannesburg. It's the city of Den Bosch, where actually, when you see on the left-hand side, you see the wastewater treatment plants and the sewage sludge digester. So then the it's upgraded the biogas, and through the green gas pipeline, it is going to the city buses who are on the right-hand side. So that's where you see the city buses, and the waste heat is also used here, and that is going to the city district heating system of the city. So this is a kind of integrated approach, and I think that's if you can realize that would be very ideal. Of course, it's not always possible because you need the right size, the right people. You need the collaboration between a lot of different departments to make this possible. So to conclude, I think, and this is also something that comes out of COP, we don't want to have emissions to the air anymore. No more methane, no more CO2, so there has to be a price on this emission, and that will improve the markets for biogas production as well. This is a very much, let's say, under debate now at this moment in Europe and also in the Netherlands. But then when we do this, there will be a market because the fossil fuels become more expensive because of the CO2 emissions, and the renewables then can replace the fossil fuels. So biogas will be a substantial part of this. So I think that is really, let's say, of the renewable energy, but also of the bioeconomy. Yes, because we use all the resources, and what cannot be used in material, we can produce biogas out of it. And I think with all, let's say, the experience we have in the Netherlands, we are really looking for collaboration here also with you in South Africa, and see how, let's say, similar approaches can be realized, and I'm available to discuss this further with you. So thank you very much for your attention, and you will get this presentation later on, and there are some links also if you want more information. Now there is time for one question, and then we have to proceed. There is no question, so then I will take my different role. Oh, sorry. Yeah, it's okay, sorry. Your name?
Yes, my name is...
Financial support that we give. So we from our agency, we give financial support to biogas projects. And actually from our side, we give the same amount of money for the production of renewable electricity as we give also for the biomethane. And we have a biofuel blending obligation. So the Shell, Exxon and so on, they have to commit to this obligation, and the blending obligation, I believe this year it is 14%. And through this blending obligation, they are obliged to feed in, yes, renewable fuels. It can be bioethanol, they can buy that from Brazil, or it can be let's say HVO, yes, produced from oils. That's what they can do. But we also allow them to use so-called certificates from the biogas. So when biogas is fed into the car, is fueling the car, the same amount of energy they can also use for this obligation. And actually that realizes the highest income for the biomethane producer. So that's why a lot of people are now producing this biomethane. And they know that next year we will even increase this blending obligation. So there is a growing market. So that's why biomethane is quite popular at this moment. Yeah? Okay?
Thank you. I think you mentioned our project where we
Yeah.
electricity from methane in our landfills. I think the challenge for us still remains the use for heat, depending on the commercial activities, the industrial activities around your project.
Yeah.
It then becomes a challenge to harvest and then
Yeah.
because we're very much a warm country and we don't have much of household
heat,
for
yeah.
heat, unless it's for industrial purposes.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. We will discuss it further, what can be done. Okay, so thank you. Then I will now take up my the next role, my other role as being the moderator of this session. And I have the pleasure now to introduce the next speaker. So, this is Mandisi Mikezi from Green Cape. And actually what happened is that we, in the development of this collaboration with South Africa, we decided to collaborate also with South African partners who are also working in this same area. So then I came across, well, I know Green Cape already for a long time, the so-called DBCO project, yes, where it's a European funded project where a lot of, let's say, European people collaborate also with people from other countries. And you are in this DBCO project, so it's very glad that you're here, both representing DBCO and also Green Cape, and presenting here to us, let's say, the status, the development and the status of biogas here in South Africa. So you can use this to go to the next slide. You can stand here. You can stand here. Yes, okay. And you can watch here. Yeah, is that okay?
Let me give it a try. Awesome. Good morning, everyone. I'm Mandisa Mkhize from Green Cape. Today, I'll just speak briefly on the opportunities on biogas that we have identified within South Africa. And this is through the work we are doing with DBCO, but just also the sector work that we've been doing in South Africa for the past 10 years. So just the content of my presentation, I'll cover the overview. We will look at the legislative aspect and then financing, and then just a bit on DBCO. So what we have identified within the South African sector is just being the project, or let's say the current status, is that we have at least 28 projects that are built and commissioned within South Africa, but a lot of these numbers would really be pre-COVID numbers. And if you look at just the plant sizes, they would range from 12.5 kilowatts to 5.5 megawatts, and they're scattered all around the country. And if you look at also the breakdown, just the way the feedstock really comes from, you will also see those numbers there. Beyond just the overview and what the sector looks like, one of the deliverables for DBCO has been just looking at the market framework, and these are just the findings that have come from that report. And if you want to look at the report in more detail, it is available on the DBCO website. So we did just your typical PESTEL and Porter's 5 forces analysis, where we look at just on a PESTEL or macro level perspective, what are some of the drivers, or at least environmental factors that create an opportunity for biogas in South Africa. And if you look there, you can just see that some of the social aspects would really speak to just what anaerobic digestion is being identified as a good technology. And I won't just I won't speak much to this because just in the interest of time, but just giving you just a snapshot into exactly what we have identified and what you kind of see as if you drill it down to business, what are some of the bargaining power for the buyers, what are the bargaining powers for the suppliers, and what are some of the threats to new entrants. And we know that in the biogas space, high capital is quite a prevalent barrier. It includes sunk costs and down to what are the substitutes, what are the threats of substitute product, including just the lack of biogas regulatory framework. If you look at other cleaner energy sources in South Africa, we do understand that legislative-wise, if you look at just the bid window rounds that have come online, the legislation there is more established, it's more developed, there's more attention there, even the finances are more comfortable funding those big projects. And then you look at, where is that effort in the biogas space? So we've looked at that, and we understand that there's more work that still needs to be done, just to also kind of bring the price down, and you kind of de-risk all these projects like we do see now for example, onshore now is priced at least 42 cents. I mean, 42 to 47 cents. But biogas is still quite more expensive. But that is also driven just by the regulatory and, the financing space. Then again, I will speak to just what then the biogas by numbers. These numbers from the SABIA, that is the South African Biogas Industry Association. They released this market position paper. and they just kind of gave us, generation potential by the sector and what, those numbers look like within the next 5 years, and then just within the range of different sectors. Again, just what then is the job creation potential, because that is also a big part of the opportunities that do emerge from these cleaner energy sources, and then the carbon reduction and the technology comparison. And this is all stretched out within a 5-year period. Within the legislative aspect, there will be legislative considerations within each part of a project development journey. And this, from just the feedstock, is it alien invasion feedstock? Is it plastic? What is, allowed and what is not? And then you move on to, process and project. Within that space as well, there are certain legislative considerations that you need to kind of look at, including, permitting, air quality, and then down to just what your products are. Are you using that for, any electricity generation? Who is your off-taker? Is it municipalities? We now understand that municipalities are enabled to procure or generate their own power, but obviously provided they are in good financial standing. And then other products as well. And if it's, there are products that are produced from your process that, you didn't really forecast for, you do understand that there are cost implications to that. And then this is just really a broader, legislative and policy requirements. You can also access this industry brief that was compiled by Yassine, my colleague, and it will just give you a more detailed view into exactly what are all the legislative considerations that you need to kind of look at if you are interested or looking to enter into the biogas space. Again, financing is a big part of how well, your project how well your project kind of delivers, or how well your project, what chances it has of succeeding. We do understand, as I mentioned in the reprogram, the South African Renewable Energy Auction Program, that biogas is one of the low of uptake technologies. And what makes that the case, again, the bid prices, it's not competitive, and also commercial, banks in South Africa aren't well informed with the biogas project and development as they are now with wind and solar at large scale. So a lot of work needs to be done there. And then if we look at just what are the type of financing options that are available to you if you are in the biogas space, within the pre-feasibility stage, again, it will be equity, blended finance, concessional finance. But what we did identify is that prevalent financing options do include balance sheet within project development stage, and obviously debt once you've de-risked your project. Then within what are sort of the prevalent finances that would be able to look at funding your project in South Africa, it would definitely be DFIs and commercial banks, and a lot of that happens at business development stage. Typically, what does it look like, for a person looking to enter into the biogas space, and within each of those, what are the time periods and what just the key actions that you need to kind of look into when you are executing your project. And this might also, be very simple and basic, but the work we do kind of does engage with new entrants that are looking to enter into the biogas space. So a lot of this information would be relevant for them, but I'm not sure if it will be relevant to all of you. But that's to kind of demystify what exactly, looks like to enter into the biogas space, and what are some of the tick boxes and checkpoints that checklists that you need to kind of done for you to move from scoping down to execution. And within each of these stages, obviously, there are barriers, and there is a need for you to motivate for financing at each of these stages. And then down now to the DBCO project that Kees had mentioned. We are part of a consortium. Green Cape and Selectra would be the South African partners. But within this consortium, we have Ghana, we have Ethiopia, we have Argentina. Yeah, I think those would be the partner countries. And what exactly this project is meant to kind of do, this would be one of the deliverables. We've created a matchmaking platform where you as a service provider can just register your profile, you upload your business opportunity, and then you are able to just find suitable partners around the world, actually. And what this has done is really kind of help your emerging biogas service providers to kind of match up with partners from well-developed countries. This is either to just share knowledge, financing, or look into, partnering with equipment supplies, because we don't have a lot of that in South Africa. So this is just one of the deliverables that we're very proud of, because the real impact potential here is already coming across. We do see demo case studies as well, and that's really what DBCO essentially is. We do have other deliverables, including the market framework. I won't really get into all of that, but if you want to just know more exactly where to access some of the deliverables of DBCO, you can just come talk to me after the session. But yeah, that's just all I've got to say today in a nutshell, and thank you so much, Kes, for the opportunity.
Thank you very much for your presentation.
No problem.
So if you could maybe remain here,
Yeah,
maybe
sure.
a question.
No problem. I hope I
Yes,
didn't rush
yes,
through that.
Yes, please.
Thank you. I'm Anthony Cooper, CSIR.
Sure.
Your presentation was mainly about the future, but what is the current situation? How much biogas is
In the provinces, the projects are.
There is a question?
Thanks, Marisa, for the presentation.
Sure.
I think for me what stands out is the fact that the banks
Yeah.
don't understand this infrastructure and the landscape and everything.
Sure.
How are we going to make them understand? What interventions are they?
Sure.
Because, when you talk to government, for example, you'll pick it up in other entities of government at local level. They believe in the banks.
Yeah.
So if you're talking to them and the banks don't understand and they don't understand,
Yeah.
what are we to do? What are the interventions?
Definitely. Thank you for your question. So with DBCO, what we've actually tried to do, we've hosted at least 2 local stakeholder workshops, really trying to tackle that. In the last session, we had 2 speakers, one from African Development Bank, one from, I can't remember the name, but Jonathan First, who's been very much involved in the DFI space funding biogas projects, into like more, right? It was usually like 70 to 30 split. Now that's like slightly more. So more dates from the banks, because there's that intention from at least the legislative parties that are driving that uptake. So I think it's
Collaboration between Netherlands and South Africa, specifically on organic waste from cities. So the floor is yours to present your approach. Thanks.
Cool. So, morning everyone. My name's Emil Fourie. As I said, as Kees has just mentioned, I was very fortunate in being allowed to travel through to the Netherlands on the first Biovalsa program. I got to see a lot of the operations that he was highlighting earlier in his presentation. I'm going to just run through what I'm going to speak to today about and introduce myself. Then I'm going to just give you an overview of the challenges that we faced as an organization and as an entrepreneur in the organic waste space for the last 13 years. The realized projects that we're doing down in the Western Cape. I discussed briefly, just what the preferred technology is and why there is resistance and hesitation to investing in the space. And then finally, I think just the role of what the future is and the vision of what South Africans and Africans can play in this conversation. So yeah, born and bred in Cape Town. raised on the Cape Flats, introduced to education, overseas experiences, and by the time I left school, my life and my vision of South Africa was completely different to even someone like my immediate family. With that weapons and those tools, I realized the only difference between myself and other South Africans is that I was given these opportunities. And what am I going to do with it? So that was the start of my journey. I founded Y Waste, which is a food waste to compost company. I then looked at finding the Orasa Organics Recycling Association of South Africa. I did a small little Giza Kappa project, which was on-site sorting and drop-off systems, and then looked at solid waste systems in informal settlements and how do we actually address it and bring a bit of circular economic thought patterns to that. So why waste? Why waste looked at waste that we were throwing to landfill. So exactly the conversation that we're having here. The biggest problem that I identified was that we had a broken biocycle. The reason the biocycle was broken was because we spent all of our big agricultural efforts in bringing food from rural areas through to the urban areas, and we sort of forgot to return that to the soil. And that is a big sort of understanding that you have to have about this sector and about this industry. At the end of the day, we're working with organic material and it has to return to the soil. It's the way nature intended, and it's the way that all of these operational activities actually need to be rolled out. So our primary focus was actually to start acquiring feedstock. A lot of times people are saying, why can't you open a biogas plant? Why don't you have? The reason is because they don't have adequate feedstock and they don't have the right feedstock. So we looked at first closing the first primary cycle of just looking at organic waste and returning it to the soil. And now we're in the phase of looking at how do we start adding greater value, looking at the likes of biogas, looking at the likes of renewable energy, methane extraction, and throughout this process. So the challenges, the one I really want to just highlight here is the restrictive environment. For the last 13 years, it's been extremely difficult to pioneer and to get an organic waste company sort of growing and developing. This led me to partnering with a few other members from industry, and we founded Orasa. Orasa is an industry-led organization. We are we try to remain as neutral as possible in not pushing our own private and business efforts and energies. And we're looking to grow and to make this environment as enabling as possible. One of the most amazing things we've done was legislation for norms and standards, which was drafted by a consultant, was going to actually make a composting facility 5 million rand more expensive for the fact that we would need to have certain types of barriers and concrete linings and stuff like that. And we then looked at this legislation and said, this isn't in our favor. It's in South Africa, we're working in rural areas, we're not working within city constraints. Why on earth do we need to spend an extra 5 million for a small business that can't even get a small loan on something that restrictive? So that was the first thing that we looked at. We've looked at legislation around norms and standards for composting, which is being gazetted. The same with now the treatment of organic waste. And we're looking at the liquid ban and the ban of organic waste. So in the Western Cape, there's a big ban. At the moment, the environment in the rest of South Africa is very restrictive. Landfill rates are too cheap. Our alternatives can't be competitive in that market, and we're having to find alternate ways to now try and disrupt that. So success so far, there is a balance between profit, protecting the environment, and looking after our people. The green economy is definitely a vehicle and a mechanism for change. Currently, we're diverting between 10 and 15 tons of food waste from landfill a day. We employ 23 staff. We've got 5 interns from around the world that is helping us with very high-level stuff. And we've got over 13 years' experience in this industry. We specialize in the ability to, which is something no one has really mentioned yet, but adding value to the digestate fraction. This is fundamental in the success of these plants, and a lot of biogas facilities and AD facilities have failed because they have failed to look at this value add to the business model. If you ignore the digestate, You know, you are looking at a lot of money just going to waste, and the business model will never ever work. An example of this was a plant, a massively funded, government-funded plant in the Western Cape that had to shut down. And before our drought, this company was dumping 100,000 liters of liquid waste into the drain. At R1 a liter, I'm sorry, but that water could have been repurposed and retreated and been sent back to us during the water crisis. So people with funding, people with mechanisms to support these projects, you have to hold these people accountable. They can't go on carrying out with operations like that. Preferred technology is definitely a hybrid model, right? You need a compost plant to act as a buffer system for when a biogas system needs to be decommissioned or maintained or for whatever reason. The landfill, the reason it is successful is because it's cheap as chips, it never shuts down and will accept any waste. If your treatment facility doesn't offer that to the current market, they are going to go and look elsewhere. So these systems have to work in unison. The vision in the future of South Africa, I think because of our travel and our distance, we really need to look at decentralized systems to negate the water, the transport and the excessive cost. The energy crisis we're currently sitting in, I don't think I need to go on any more around that. AI, human interaction, a lot of the systems that you see from first world countries are amazing. The problem is that they don't allow us to employ much needed jobs for people that we really need. So you need to look within the value chain, and you need to look at all the stakeholders in this value chain and see where can you employ, what do you not need to automate, and how do you make sure that we include the masses of people that actually need jobs. And the waste economy is pivotal for that. I think cell phones are also definitely something that we need to look at into the future, and how we integrate all of these systems to make sure that it's accessible and usable, and communications are sent to everybody else that needs to understand and better get to know this. So that's my presentation, and again, Case, I just want to say thank you. It was an amazing opportunity.
Yes. Okay, thank you very much for your presentation. Maybe questions from the room?
You can ask.
Yes. So you now have this operation where you produce, let's say, the fertilizers. Yes? So it's really closing the cycle. So at what point do you think would it be? Would you consider to include a biogas facility in your operation?
So we're at that point now. So we believe that we've got a very favourable environment in the Western Cape. Mm-hmm. There's about a 2-year push to secure market share. Top to mind. One, I don't think they could acquire the waste that they thought they would be able to. Yeah. And that's just through how waste is managed and the custody of waste within municipal restrictions. The other is from just personal experience, I think that they tried to penetrate the market just too aggressively. I think that they were accepting waste at a loss, and I don't think that the offtakes for certain waste streams and byproducts of the system, I don't think it was fully understand. And I don't think they understood it fully. And I think the fact that they were running and trying to obviously learn at that scale, I think was also difficult. I think with this, the issue with waste and the issue with working with waste is that the problem isn't acquiring waste. I mean, you can probably, agree with that. That's not our problem. The problem is having the capacity and the processes and the systems to be able to actually work with it. And I think that's probably the biggest learning curve that people need to wrap their heads around.
Okay, thank you very much, Emil. Yes. Thank you. So. We'll now go next to Bio to What. Yes, 10 years ago I arrived here in South Africa for the first time, and actually that was because we were funding a project for biogas development, and that was Sean Thomas from Bio to What, who was at that moment trying to develop his project in Bronkhorstspruit. And I still remember that we were going to Bronkhorstspruit, And there was just a green field. There were cows, there was a lot of dung, and the water was just flowing into the river, yes? And his ambition was to change this all and put up, let's say, an anaerobic digestion facility. And you managed to do so. So we have here with us Glenn Thompson from Bio2What, who can explain to us how this all has been done.
Thank you.
Please, the floor is
Thank
yours.
you. Morning, everybody. I'm Glenn Thompson, the CFO, and I'd like to just have a quick discussion about our facility in Bronkhorstspruit, which is a large AD facility. By background, the business was founded by Sean Thomas, as we've found out. The first project was a 4.6 megawatt plant, which is currently undergoing planning to hopefully close fairly shortly, expanding it to 8.6 megawatts. It was one of the first independent generators to sell privately to large industrials in South Africa, and we sell to BMW South Africa. Power is wheeled via both Eskom and the city of Tshwane, and I'll go into further discussion about that a little later. We've been operational since 2015. Our initial capital investment was 170 million. We process currently 300 tons of waste a day, and with the expansion this will increase to 450 tons a day. Bio2What's achievements is we were the winner of a Renewable Energy Award in 2015. We were the runner-up for the Africa Energy Project in 2015, and it was the first industrial scale biogas plant on the continent. So that is our focus, industrial scale. A picture says 1,000 words. We heard about a green field, and there's our facility in Bronkhorstspruit. I won't go into much more detail because I think the picture says it all. Our model is a waste to energy. Obviously, we're taking feedstock from manure and large food processors, avoiding landfill. It goes into our process, it gets mixed, and the digestion takes place. What we get out of the system are two elements, biogas, which I'll talk about, and fertilizer. We've been calling it soil enhancers. UNIDA's just completed a study that says this is actually a fertilizer. And our fertilizer gets returned to the farming community. As you see, we are peri-urban. The biogas goes through engines, CHPs, and we produce 4.6 megawatts of power, which then gets wheeled to our off-taker, BMW. And I think the importance is the whole cycle. I've been asked to focus on the business case, and obviously there's a lot of benefits, but we've also got to weigh up the costs, the risks, and the alternative to biogas. I think the benefits are, given the correct environment, biogas makes commercial sense. But I do say environment, correct environment. It's the right type of business for South Africa. I think that's essential. It's base load power. We hear a lot about the renewables, but it's all intermittent power. I'd love at 40, 50 cents a kilowatt, but I don't think I could survive, and my wife definitely wouldn't survive having power between 9 and 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So I think that's important. It's also important in that it's labor intensive and we're comparable to coal. We create 30 jobs per megawatt, which is a direct comparison to dirty technologies. But at the moment, the cleaner renewables don't create anywhere that in terms of those kinds of numbers. In terms of our facility, and I will get to this in a little bit more detail in a minute or two, we process potentially 2% of South Africa's organic waste. And we'll talk about that further. It's sustainable and it's green. We're removing 100,000 tons of CO2 annually from the environment. We use all our methane via our engines. We're returning this fertilizer back to the farming communities. And I think just to put it into context, 450 tons a day doesn't sound like a lot. But annually, that's 164,000 tons of waste going through this plant. If you consider a small car maybe 1 or 2 tons, try 164,000 cars. And over the plant's lifetime, we will process 3.6 million tons of waste. I think putting that into context, if we look at the third item, sorry, some of the slides are a bit small. The third item is organic waste, and it's the second largest waste stream going into our landfill. And at the moment, we're talking between 5 and 6 million tons annually going in. So I said we could consume 2%, and that's a little bit like saying, how do you eat an elephant? And the saying is, one bite at a time. Well, I would propose, how do we eliminate this organic waste going into our landfill? Maybe it's one biogas plant at a time. Might take years and years and years to do, but if we make a start, we'll get to the end. If we don't make a start, that organic waste will continue to go to landfill, and we all know the issues of sending organic waste to landfill. There's smells, there's seepage, there's etc., etc. Methane evaporating. Even if you're capturing the methane, there's still the CO2, etc., etc. Landfill is not a solution. We're running out of landfill airspace at a chronic rate, and I think we have to do something. But let's have a look at the costs, risks, and alternatives of a biogas plant. It's not a cheap technology, biogas, and it's certainly not comparable to pricing that you can get out of solar and wind. And I think we have to accept that, but it does offer us something. It offers us base load power, and that's key. That's what we need in South Africa, is base load. To give you an idea, 50% of our revenue is consumed in operational costs. That's before debt servicing, shareholder returns, etc., etc. 50% goes to just running the plant. The plant is manned 24/7. There's literally millions of individual parts in a biogas plant. If you just look at one biogas engine, there's probably 100,000 parts on an engine, never mind anything else. And we currently undergo all the licensing requirements of any big industrial player. Rightly, I don't propose that we shouldn't, but there has to be the recognition that this is an extremely expensive process to go through. Your EIAs, air emissions, water use, etc., etc., etc. I mean, we've spent 5 years trying to develop a licensing that our byproduct, the digestate, is actually a fertilizer. So the projects are low return, high risk projects. They're extremely sensitive to capital costs, operational costs, and dare I say, legislative risk. I think we have heard that the last decade has been particularly difficult in South Africa. The key benefits of biogas are currently not recognized nor commercialized, and that is, what's the benefit of avoiding landfill? And we just ignore that totally. We say, no, biogas must compete with every other technology. Forget about that benefit. Okay? We ignore the fact that it's baseload power. And there's a lot of things that you can do with baseload power, and I'll touch on it hopefully at the end. And as coal enters its sunset era, dare I say, but I think that's a fact that we all have to face, critical is going to be job replacement. We can't just roll out technologies that are going to eliminate hundreds of thousands of jobs. It's not viable, not as a country, not as a sector, or any other measure. We have to start thinking about job replacement. I wanted to show this little picture because I think it's very important. On the right-hand side in the pie is Germany, and that's their current technology generating their power in the country. On the left-hand side is South Africa. So I think interesting, the things that I'm going to point out is Germany currently is only using approximately a third of renewable energy for their generation, and they have this wonderful mix of baseload power from nuclear, hydro, etc., etc. And on top of that, they are part of a European grid that if something really happens and a crisis develops in Germany, they tap the grid, and the next thing they're getting power from Norway via their water storage programs. I think if we look on the left-hand side at South Africa and taking into account where we are in 2020, we're still 95% coal-based in energy. We know that's got to be replaced, and there's no ways that a single technology is going to replace that. So stop dreaming. It's not going to be solar and wind that come to our solution. We have to develop a full range of generation technologies to be sustainable and produce power reliably. The risks. The greatest risk has been the legislative uncertainty recently. We need a mechanism where our society will recognize the benefits of biogas. And that's, we've discussed them: baseload power, job creation, landfill avoidance. I'm not going to go through all of them. I haven't touched on the health benefits of avoiding avian influenza, salmonella, etc. Biogas eliminates these risks. I think the key element where we are now, we have a plant that works and is proven, but the municipalities are going to play an absolute critical role going forward. They need to be supportive and take into account the full range of benefits for a biogas plant. So in other words, when you go to a municipality, you can't hear the words, sorry, our wheeling fee is 60 or 70 cents a kilowatt, and that solar can afford it. Well, then run your city on solar. We need to realize a mechanism that we can bring in all these technologies. Alternatives, we've heard about composting, and I think I'm a great supporter of it. But where our plant is focused is industrial scale. I don't think there's any composting facility in the country that on a regular basis, day after day, can receive hundreds of thousands of litres of expired beer or cold drinks or food waste every single day. The volumes, we just cannot use composting. And I thank you for your time. I just wanted to close off with one thought. John Kennedy said, we choose to go to the moon not because it's easy, but because it's difficult. And it will measure the best of our energies and skills, because the challenge is something we're prepared to accept. And I can't help compare that to our transition from a coal-based energy system to a new global energy system of it's difficult, it's complex, there's no one answer. Biogas will play a very small role in the total transition, but it is critical, as is potentially solar, wind, etc. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for this presentation and also the explanation how Bio2Watt has grown and how you could develop your business. There may be questions in the room. Yes, in the back.
Should I invest my pension in
Holistic thing, and until society and our cities recognize that, we won't see biogas develop to its true potential. Like I said, at the moment, we saw the number of plants. I know of 2 of an industrial scale that are potentially taking out 2 to 4% of our organic wastes. How do we get to 100% without support and recognition? We're not asking for a handout. We're saying, what is the benefit to the city of avoiding building a landfill? Suddenly people aren't screaming about living next door landfill and having gas smells and getting sick, and food waste finding its way back into society. We hear about children dying from picking up food on landfills, and I'm not blaming landfills or anyone, but I'm trying to say that there's a better system available to us, and like John Kennedy said, we challenge to reach that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, there are just one question there, and then
You touched a little bit on the question that was burning on my side, the support that you got from municipality. Bronkhorstspruit is in Swanet. I'm not going to ask you to go through the detail of that support, but would you be able to share with the private company that's trying to get support in the municipalities that you are involved in that area? Because I think municipal support is critical to starting a project like yours.
So I think I can say, obviously, the powers and authorities at municipalities change on a regular basis, but what the success of the project was that this project went in at the most senior level, at a municipal manager level and higher, rather than trying to knock at the door of an electricity department. There was a bigger vision. There was, our market has waste which we can send to. We're running out of landfill airspace. There was a holistic view. Whereas I do know some of the municipalities have spoken to us and said, there's a wheeling fee, we're not interested, not negotiable, take it or leave it. Well, the result is it doesn't happen.
yeah. Okay, thank you. Because of time, we will continue and have a discussion later on. Before going to the discussion, before going to the discussion, we'll have 2 more presentations. So this was about realized plans, and the next presentation will be with my neighbor, Rutger de Bruin from Nexus Novus, originally from the Netherlands, I believe, but he is more a global citizen and living now here in South Africa, and he is working on developing projects on biogas. So the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I would need the remote. Yeah, I'll keep it short. I'm Rutger de Bruin, Nexus Novus. We are developers, pure sang, but also investors in a variety of projects globally. We are currently developing in India, South Africa, Kenya, Uganda, and Brazil, for example, also Denmark and Greece. And I am not pushing the red button. I'm going to skip over technology on what we do and how we do it, but more like focus on the philosophy on zich. What we do is we build modular. We try to keep it as simple as possible. We try to make it scalable. We don't over-invest. We build slowly over time, like you have done, for example. You build, you get your proof of concept, and then you extend. The New Horizons plant in, for example, Cape Town failed because they built too large, too quickly, without securing anything that's the basics of actually getting project finance in. We have heard quite a bit of discussion about actually the most important point, it's finance. How do you get the banks to finance it? How do you get the capex under control? How do you make sure that you get the risks under control? Now, what we do is we don't copy-paste technology from the West into, let's say, South Africa or India. We develop locally to make sure that we have technology that can actually take a beating. Waste is massively heterogenic. That means it changes every single day. You don't know what you're going to get. and stabilizing that takes a few processing steps, and your biogas plant or whatever additional capacity you have needs to be able to take that beating to make sure that you can run your plant instead of always being in operations. This is, for example, a modular project we're doing in India, where we have a sorting line. This is 1,000 tons per day. A sorting line MSW, we sort it into organics and into RDF. The organics is 60% of the waste composition, just like in South Africa. That will go to an AD. We produce CNG because in India there's a CNG offtake market for it, which the government gives you a guaranteed price. There is one of your business reasons for not failing. The government gives you a price. For the power, the government gives you a purchase agreement at a stabilized price for 20 years. Hence, it works. It took us 7 to 8 years to lobby the government to move from a tipping fee landfilling organization towards power purchase and CNG markets. It takes a lot of guts and efforts to actually get there. And once again, this first plant in South Africa, or at least successful plant in South Africa, shows that legislation and a stable price is very important. But I'd like to actually focus mostly on the finance part. I think that's our specialization. What you see in Glasgow right now, right, is the apathy of the governments to actually make a dent. The allocations of money are not nearly efficient or enough, to actually change the paradigm. Timmermans from the European Union is allocating 100 million to sustainable energy globally. 100 million is a few plants. That's nothing. You need trillions of dollars to actually make a dent altogether. The problem is that the oil company, the big oil, is sucking out quite a bit of the money through government-sponsored schemes. For example, our Dutch government was initially refusing to stop funding the oil companies abroad. What they use and what we do is similar. We use their techniques from a funding perspective, twist it around slightly because we are much more smaller players and we are more nimble, so to say, but we use the same funding principles that big oil uses. What we do is we de-risk the entire project. We de-risk it from technology, from feedstock to offtake. We make sure that these contracts are well in place, not like the New Horizons in Cape Town. But it's just there. We go one step further. We split up the entire risk of funding into small bite-sized components that specific entities can pick up. Now, if you ask, let's say, Nedbank in South Africa to do project finance in biogas, they will tell you after 2 years of discussions that they can't do it. Why? It's because the risk to them is too large. What they see is all the risk, credit risk, operation risk, feedstock risk, all of it, and they need to understand it and then give you a rate. They can't because they don't understand. Solar took a while to get there, and biogas or waste or any new technology just isn't there. What we do is we break it up and slice and dice the risk into small portions that people can actually chew up and eat and take their own responsibilities for. What we do is, for example, we ask banks to take the credit risk. Only focus on credit risk. You are going to be completely insured against default. So the banks can give you a very low rate. We have currently gotten a rate of 0.23% in an Indian project. That is almost free money. Now understand, the oil companies also getting these rates because they've done this a million times before. It is very cheap finance if you know how to de-risk all of that. In South Africa, we expect for a project of around 150 million rand, 1.5%. Once again, Nedbank can't compete with that. So the local banks can't compete with these rates. And it's because we have ECAs, for example, Atradius in the Netherlands, insure the banks that at default they will take over. Atradius, by the way, the same company, government sponsored, is now stopping finally to sponsor oil projects. This is the finance that big oil uses, and we are just copy-pasting what they are doing. Now, the biggest gimmick, so to say, or the biggest change in what we're doing is we take 2 steps further. Normally, an ECA or this kind of structure, 1 to 5% of Dutch exporting companies would know how to use this. It is not well used, they don't know how to use it, and most project developers can't use it either because their balance sheet isn't strong enough. If you have a beautiful project and it's viable, you still can't develop it because your balance sheet strength. And we need millions of biogas plants and trust me, the amount of developers that are out there with the balance sheet strength that can actually build that is maybe once again 1 or 2%. So you're talking about 1 or 2% of the developers and 1 or 2% of the exporters that can find a match, and hence you'll never build these projects. What we do is we add another layer to it, actually 2 more layers to it. We build many projects on modular technology globally, and hence we have a portfolio management de-risking associated with that. If you have the same technology and similar kind of feedstocks globally, you don't have a one point of failure in one project. You have multiple projects you can run as a portfolio. We do this with solar, with waste to energy, with biogas. On top of it, and this is the last part, is we use guarantors, basically investing companies that use non-cash equity. I'll be able to explain it in more detail if I had much more time. Their balance sheet strength, basically, is used to allow these projects to find daylight. So basically, with all these 4 steps together, if you pile up the risks associated with it, this is what you normally ask a bank to swallow in one go. That is why project finance at 70-30 debt equity doesn't work. Also in South Africa, it doesn't work because only just a few companies will ever be able to tap into that. So with this structure, we generate jobs. We can quickly deploy capital globally, and there are people in the audience over here that can hopefully get the deployment by the end of this month. And it would have taken us 6 weeks. 6 weeks turnarounds for 1.5% for 150 million rand for a renewable project. That's fantastic. If you, for example, look at what the city of Joburg, compared to, let's say, Cape Town, could be investing in, base load. This is base load what you could have. CNG could be a fantastic opportunity as well, but you don't have an offtake for it. So you must then convert trucks into CNG fueled trucks, so you generate your own offtake. The problem is Joburg, Cape Town are in good standing. What about the other cities in South Africa? They are not allowed to get these kind of structures up. So should the province pick up the bill or give a guarantee by it? It's in the end, who's going to give the counter risk about the payment and the offtake? Because B2B offtakes, in all honesty, makes you geographically locked. You have the problem that you always must look for a company that is having the green intentions to go for green fuel. What you want is a systemic approach in South Africa, that you have one offtake for CNG, one offtake for a power purchase agreement, and that the province, not the city, potentially, takes up the bill if they fail. So in the end, it is de-risking. And in the end, there are loads of opportunities we are looking for in South Africa to invest in. That is FDI, and it requires obviously support from the government to change a few policy problems and hurdles, because there are quite a few. Compost is an absolute issue. Fertilizer, I would love to talk to you after. If you have solved the compost to fertilizer conundrum, basically you've taken the massive hurdle away that investors would be looking at. This is an almost impossibility. In the end, it is about de-risking the project, making sure that cities don't over-ask developers on taking and exposing risk. You need to understand that the developers already take quite a bit of risk, financial risk, and it is a partnership, and everybody needs to help take a small part of that risk and make it their own. You can't dump it on the banks, or you can't dump it on the project developers. I'd like to quickly tip upon a very important aspect as well. We simulate our modules and technology globally. We engineer it in the simulator. We operate these things in the simulator. Once again, if you have a fleet of projects and they are fairly similar, you have a portfolio opportunity over there. Now, IT, and specifically the one-to-one simulations, really help with understanding these kind of risks. Imagine that in Chernobyl, instead of doing tests on a live plant, they would have used a simulator. I mean, you know, we would have had a very different discussion altogether over now. That is what we do as well. So if you look at de-risking, it comes with the same technology, modular technology. We scale it once we have proof of concept on location. We do many different places. We use big data and simulations to get it done. But also in finance, we de-risk it. And I do believe that our financial structure is very similar to what banks, oil companies have been using. And it's just time that in this transition, we don't shy away from using these kind of hyper-capitalistic tools, for a better social environment. Why not? The tools are there. And I could have talked for hours about this topic. I think I should stop right now. Basically, it's about de-risking and a collaboration with the various municipalities. And I would love to speak later, of course, also to Joburg to see what we could have in offer. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rutger, very much for your explanation about de-risking the development of plants. Is there a question at this moment? This will certainly come back in the discussion. Yes, because then I think it's very good now to give the floor to the city of Joburg, who will explain to us, how the city of Joburg is looking at waste management and what new operations you see. So, so you can use this to operate it. Most welcome to present here, to give your presentation. Where is the first one? Yes, so, okay, the floor is for Mogadi Mapoto.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Mogadi Mapoto from the city of Johannesburg, from the department called Environment and Infrastructure Service Department. So I'll be talking about the waste management services in the city of Johannesburg, your collection and how we treat the waste.
Is it loud enough in the back? Okay, yeah, please go.
Okay, like I said, I'll be talking about waste collection and treatment in the city of Johannesburg. So currently in the city, we have about 4.9 million population with about 1.8 million households. We also have about 42 garden sites, 35 buyback centers, 30 are privately owned and 5 are city owned. Waste collection and disposal in the city of Johannesburg, we all know that the collection in the city of Johannesburg is done by Pick It Up, which is run collected refusing. They collect the waste from the households and then they dispose in our landfill site once a week. So the city collects about 1.6 million tons of waste per annum. Collection rate at the moment is sitting at 98%. The city has about 4 operational landfill sites. Together, the 4 landfill sites, we are left with about 4 to 5 airspace. So the city needs to do something because we're no longer going to have space to dump our waste. So we have identified the problem as the city. We have increased in waste generation and disposal. So as a city, we need to come with programs that is going to help us to divert this waste that is going to the landfill site. So I'm going to talk the interventions that we have put in place as a city to divert the waste that is going to the landfill site. Firstly, we have our waste minimization strategy that is just to deal with our programs that we are implementing: waste reduction, waste recycling, resource recovery, waste disposal program. We also set the targets in our integrated waste management plan of reducing the amount of waste that is going to the landfill site. So we said we want to decrease about 20% of the waste that is going to the landfill site and venture into recycling. So currently our recycling rate is at 11.4%. So we acknowledge that we are not doing well there, but we have programs that we have put in place so that we achieve our target. So firstly, I'll be talking about the recycling in the city of Johannesburg. We do have the buyback centers that are currently doing our sorting at the buyback centers. We also have the house-to-house collection. And then we also have a good relationship with the cooperatives that are operating some of our city-owned buyback centers that are doing the recycling on behalf of the city. We also have school recycling that is happening in our schools. And most importantly, we have the waste picker empowerment program where we work with the waste pickers to collect the recyclable materials in the city of Johannesburg. So this is one of them, waste minimization and service delivery in the city, just a picture just to give an idea what's happening in the city. And then another one that we are implementing as a city, we are implementing alternative waste treatment technologies, our AWTT. As I've explained that our landfill sites are running out of airspace, we only left with 4 plus 5 years of airspace. As a city, we wanted to introduce these technologies just to reduce the amount of waste that is going to our landfill site, and also do generation of renewable energy and also creation of jobs. So at the city, currently we are implementing 3 projects. We have the landfill gas to energy, we also have the waste to energy project, and lastly our biogas plant. So I'm going to go into details one by one of those projects. So I'll start with the landfill gas to energy. These projects harvest methane from the landfill site and generate electricity. So the total capacity of this project is about 19 megawatt. So, but currently, the deliverables of this project just to reduce the greenhouse gas that are going to the atmospheres, and also the electricity that is coming from there. So progress to date, the city entered into a contract with the company called Energy System Joburg to construct, operate, and maintain the landfill gas to energy project at no cost to the city. So it was basically a private finance. They come with all the finance. We just gave them the rights to harvest the methane and the site that they're going to operate. So in return, they are paying the city royalties. The calculations are their details in the contract that we have with them. So currently, we have only 3 operational sites, which is in the Robinson Deep Landfill site, Houtkopies, and Marilues. So together, at the moment, they are sitting at 7.6 megawatts combined. And we are also sitting at about 18% of greenhouse gas offset. The next project that I'm going to talk about is the waste to energy projects. This entails treatment and disposal of non-recyclable waste of about 500 tons through mass bin technology. So this project currently is registered with National Treasury as a PPP project. So it has about 3 deliverables: Treasury views and recommendation 1, approval from National Treasury, and then we also need to conduct the environmental impact assessment, and then just to request, and then PPP procurement, all that process. So this project is implemented through Section 110 of the Municipal Finance Management Act. So Development Bank of South Africa is being appointed as a city as the implementing agency. So DPSA has now appointed a transactional advisor that is going to take the project to financial closure. So we as the city, we conducted the feasibility study in 2015. So now we felt that we need to just review the feasibility study. So the transactional advisor is currently reviewing just to check the value assessment, if everything, the numbers are still the same. And then also combine this project that I'm going to talk about, the biogas, the waste to energy and biogas, they need about 10 hectares of land. So the city, the councils approved that we can, adjacent to our landfill site, there's a private owned land. So we are also acquiring that land so that we can house all our project in one place, which is the Robinson Deep Landfill site. So we have a Joburg property company that handles all our purchasing of the land. So they are currently busy with the offer to purchase. And lastly, we are implementing the biogas project just to deal with our organic waste. The project received grant funding from Global Environmental Facility. So one of the conditions that came with the grant is that Development Bank of South Africa be implemented again as the implementing agency. So we also use Section 110 to appoint DBSA. So a feasibility study was done by University of Johannesburg, and that the project came with 4 key deliverables: that we're going to implement a separation at source at the Joburg market, and then develop a 50-ton plant per day biogas plant, and then later carry out a broader feasibility study to upscale the 50-ton plant to look at the project as a bankable project, like you do your PPP again. And also as a city, we need to develop an integrated biodegradable waste management strategy. So currently, the project is at DBSA. The request for proposal RFP was issued on the 5th of November and closing tomorrow for the EPC, engineering, procurement, and construct. So that's where the project is. So we have separated the 4 deliverables. So right now we are only implementing the 2, which is separation at source and the 50-ton plant. So the separation at source will be happening at Joburg markets. So we also have a feedstock agreement with Joburg market. And then another thing is that the offtake is going to be with Metrobus. The gas that will be coming from the plant will be used to fuel our Metrobus. So currently we are sitting, maybe it might fuel about 15 to 30 Metrobuses. So just to give a picture of what we need to achieve as a city where our projects are leading. There's just the key stakeholders that we work with within the city, our internal and our external. So as a city, we want to achieve a smart city where all the interrelated partnership that is happening within the city, like we are working with Joburg Market, we're also working with City Power, in waste to energy, we also work with our Joburg Zoo and City Parks as the offtake for the digestate that will be coming from the biogas plant. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I think this looks like a lot of things are happening already, but much more can happen also. Only 4 years to go with your landfill site, so that's really, something has to happen. And actually tomorrow all the tender will close, isn't it? The tender procedure. So you will be very anxious to see what comes in by tomorrow. The 12th of November. Excellent. So I suggest we will continue this now with the full discussion. I think you will join us also or not?
Yeah, I can join us.
Is that okay?
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay, so because let's say what we have seen here today is I presented some examples from the Netherlands. We have seen a lot of different opportunities how projects development with biogas is going here in South Africa. We have heard about opportunities, but also about problems. And now from the city or here of Joburg, we have heard that, well, you want to do something, yes, with your waste. And so actually my question is, when you've seen all these options, how people develop the projects this morning. What did you learn from that? And then I would like to ask the different project developers, how do you think you could, let's say, contribute to what the city of Joburg needs? Yes, there's a real requirement to take action in Joburg. So what is needed and who could do that? So maybe I could start with the city of Joburg, if you could, reflect on what you have heard today and think, what would be a good technology to go forward?
Thank you. I think from bio to what I've learned that, you might have underestimated the cost of these projects. I think you mentioned that it costed about 170 million. That was about 10 years ago. And if I'm looking at the budget that was put in for our pilot, it's very little. I think it's less than half of that, and you're taking 10 years later. Can you imagine what is the escalation in cost as we stand right now? So I think I'm starting to get a real idea on what cost and if the city on its own can really afford. And I think he did say these are quite expensive projects to develop, which we have started to realize as cities.
They come here, you must come here.
They can't see you and hear you, no.
Yes, because you don't have so you better use this microphone there, yes. Sorry. Logistics.
Don't worry.
You have a microphone? Yeah. Okay. So now you can use this microphone. Well, it's okay. If you speak a little bit in that direction.
No, I think the question was what have we learned as Joburg? And I was saying, from bio to what I think I've started to realize how expensive are these projects. I think he mentioned like the plant costed about 170 million, which was that 10 years ago. And I'm starting to look at the budget that we have put aside as the city to develop this, which is almost like half. And can you imagine of the 170 million, can you imagine what's the value of that 10 years later? So I think as municipalities are starting to realize and learn that these projects are quite costly, And I think private partnerships are key in developing them.
Beauty.
Yeah, I think it's the way to go. I don't think as governments we can be able to afford. And also, I think he did mention that technologies are very sensitive. These technologies are very sensitive, and I don't also think as government, as municipalities, we do have the skill to run and operate and maintain these kind of technologies, which then again, shows that partnerships are really key. And I think platforms like these, they help us realize more and more as government that partnerships are very much key.
Okay.
I'm also interested in the financing. I think it was interesting to understand that the banks can actually finance this at very much lower rates. I think it's something that we need to explore with our private partners as to how we can then access those kind of funding mechanisms that then exist. I think also from the Netherlands presentation, the fact that the blending in fuel, I think that's what maybe national government can start to look at, because then it starts to create the demand for such alternative fuel. I think that's where maybe we need to look at if there is any way where we can make it mandatory for the fuel manufacturing industry to start to blend, so that at least there is a demand that we create as government for such projects.
Okay, yes, so thank you. Yes, I think there is a kind of mixture of, let's say, municipal responsibility and municipal action you can take.
It's going to echo. I think there's going to be a loop of microphones currently. Sorry.
Well, they are in charge of the...
Oh, okay.
So, for example, what we have done in the Netherlands is also that the federal government has taken action, yes, to set legislation in such a way that it encourages, let's say, the production of, let's say, energy, or it encourages recycling rather than bringing waste to the landfill site. And this is just very simple, put a tax on landfilling, yes, and we have a tax of 80 euro per ton. So each ton that someone brings to the landfill site, he has to pay a tax of 80 euro. So with that, people are immediately looking for alternatives. So it can either be recycling, or you can bring it to a biogas facility, because that really encourages to develop the alternatives. But that requires action from the federal government to make that happen. So are you in contact with the federal government to look at this legislative, let's say, environment that could encourage the different treatment of waste?
I think there's my colleagues from the national government here. Maybe
I don't know everyone.
They can respond for themselves as to
Please.
Yes. So good morning, everyone. So my name is Michelle Govender. I'm from the National Department of Environment. Well, actually, it's Forestry, Fisheries.
Oh, yeah.
Do you want me to sit there?
Yeah, well, it's indeed that probably you should sit here, yes. We don't have a walking microphone, is it? No. Okay. Yeah, then the speaker has to move, yes? So.
Yeah, that's fine. My name is Michelle, as I indicated. I'm from the National Department of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment, and we basically put all of these regulations in place when it comes to environmental. On the environmental side, I'm actually exploring over the last year and a half the landfill tax issue. We've got quite a considerable amount of work done in that regard. And I think the discussions that we're having now is with the National Department of Treasury to understand how to then implement this. We have obviously other mechanisms which we're doing in parallel. which is create, for example, the diversion targets when it comes to organic waste. And organic waste is the biggest waste stream in our country. We produce in excess of 39 million tons per annum. And so we're trying to divert as much as possible. It's admirable, the work that Bio2What has done. We've walked this path with them in terms of securing feedstock. But the feedstock isn't always clean. And it's across the country. We're having this, and we're seeing that there is opportunities in the waste space. It's a 25 or maybe billion rand industry, so we're literally throwing away that amount of waste. So those are the initiatives we're doing. It's basically multitudes, different angles that we're approaching it. And so we're very open as well as government, as the national department, to listen to what is happening out there, look at the difficulties. Legislation, as Emil and Glenn have said, has been seen to be a condom to development, if I can put it that way, right? Because that's what has been said to us. So we said, how then can we make it easier? So we've now developed exclusion regulations, waste exclusion. So for waste which has a proven beneficial use, we're excluding those waste streams, provided obviously that you report what is happening, but we exclude it. So that takes away the legislative process, the process of appointing a consultant, getting an EIA done for a waste management license, for example, to be issued. All of these things are happening. So I think maybe from an industry perspective, not as fast as we would hope it to happen, but it is happening. It is happening, and it's happening on a large scale. So hopefully within the next few years, we will see greater push towards then diverting many of our waste streams away from landfill.
Okay, that's very promising. Yes, so we were happy to hear that from you. 2 years after now, we'll meet again.
We will.
Yes, of course. Please, Rutger. And then I'll go to that side of the table to ask you a reaction.
Yeah, no,
you go first.
Fantastic, and of course, I think DTI and environment, need to come together and offer stimulations, to this industry, and actually make FDI possible, because it's not just local investments, but it must be global investments. There's an example I'd like to ask your opinion about, right? Which is one of the in-your-face kind of things, but will always be problematic. MSW, mixed waste, consists of 60% organic. Now, if you had better segregation at source drives, which by the way are never perfect, and even in the Western Amsterdam, they're not perfect. So you always have polluted waste coming out. The organics, the 60%, you can't get perfectly well done. That means that you need mechanical segregation, and we can get it up to 99% clean to go to the biogas plant, because otherwise, of course, the biogas plant, the bacteria will die. The question is the following. Given the fact that it will take years and potentially never to actually segregate all the waste properly, so that all organic waste can go to biogas plants, which is what you want. You don't want to, by the way, incinerate organic waste. That's just boiling a tea kettle. It's just water that you're trying to burn. That doesn't work. 60% is the problem. Now, if the mixed origin waste goes, after cleaning up, 99% purity, goes into the biogas plant, then that digestate, as per the current rules and regulations, may not be used in agriculture. Now, you might be right about that, because there are many countries that not allowed it. Then again, not many countries are sitting on a pile of 60% of organic waste that, because of the mixed origin, can't go anywhere. So if you can't make compost or fertilizer out of it because it's not allowed legally, then what are financial stimulants to actually get rid of it regardless? Because that is the most inhibiting factor over here. I'm not saying you must allow it to be used as fertilizer, but then find another solution, because you can solve 60% of your waste problems by just sorting mechanically, going to biogas plants, and build many of them. However, compost. Sorry, that's the question.
Okay, very, very intricate, but let's start right at the beginning, right? So yes, we are encouraging separation at source, but we must be mindful that it is the back end when it comes to the municipalities. It's very difficult to do it from household level. And household level is not where you get the bulk of the organic waste anyway, right? So what we need to be looking at is where are these coming from? Agro-processing, the agricultural sector that actually develops or generates the bulk of this. This is where we need to be targeting so that that material then goes and it's fairly clean.
The easy win.
Then those are the easy things. In terms of finding other alternates, yes, I understand, and I'm not from the Department of Agriculture, but I understand that it takes at least 2 years before you can get to a point of registration, right? And that is just consideration of what you've done, 2 years. So for me, the point that we need to do collectively and something that we need to initiate as the Environment Department as well is those talks. For example, from companies like the two of you, and look at what has happened previously. You've got the information now that can be utilized to determine or to show the registrar that actually what they are doing and what is generated and the test results actually show that the contaminants are negligible, if at all there. And that then gives the registrar confidence of reducing the time frame. So these are the kinds of interventions we need, and we need to share information, which is something we don't do very well, unfortunately, in the country. We don't do this. I mean, this information should be showcased, showcased, to show what exactly is happening, because uncertainty from a government side is not knowing whether this is going to affect the environment, the people, etc. Right? And when we don't have that certainty, we are going to err on the side of caution. So we become risk averse, and that's the principle of the National Environmental Management Act of the country.
Yes.
So that is our core, and based on where we are in the world, we are a water scarce country. We cannot afford for any contaminant to get into the water system, because then the cost of cleaning at that point becomes something that is so exorbitant that we can't, between government and society, handle it. So that's why we are risk averse. But what I'm saying is that the evidence coming out of the projects that have been happening is showing that there is a negligible contamination risk. If that is the case, then this is the information that we need to give to the legislators, so that the legislators, like we've done with the exclusion, it took a long time before we got there, but because we have proof that certain beneficial uses have a negligible negative environmental impact, we are comfortable to say, go ahead without a license, without exorbitant or stringent conditions, but just tell us, report to us and see what is happening, so that in the future we be able to legislate differently. So these are some of the things we're doing.
Okay,
Fantastic.
excellent. This sounds very good. So it's about time to close. Before we close, I would like to ask also from your side, and especially having heard all this, and I think I will come also back to you, having heard all this, what should be our next action to bring, let's say, biogas here in South Africa forward? Based on your experience, based on the discussion we have here, what do you think? If I may start with you, Glenn. You have already told a lot has to happen, but what should be the first thing we should do now?
I'll start with the end of my presentation first this time. I think it was Einstein said that I'm a genius because I stand on the shoulders of geniuses before me, Newton, etc. And I think that's applicable here. Michelle's explained the efforts that we received and benefited from environmental affairs We had help from DTI, etc., etc. City of Tshwane was really leading the fall, but we're not institutionalizing that knowledge. So in other words, now we hear about Johannesburg facing these questions, and if somehow we could group this knowledge together, it would be sitting in a meeting for literally half an hour and say to Johannesburg, but you don't have to do it all on your own. We can partner on this, and we can get a successful outcome. So until we learn to now start institutionalizing our knowledge and building on it, we're going to have the same argument over and over. So if we wanted to build a biogas plant in Cape Town today, we would need to start the whole environmental affairs.
Okay, it's a good
process.
suggestion. Thank you, thank you. So for you, Emil, what do you think? What would you recommend as the action to take next?
So I think the easiest one is that there is a ban on liquid waste going to landfill. And that statement covers anything that has a moisture content of more than 40%. So there's already legislation gazetted in place that can force the diversion of organic waste. So I think fundamentally, I think it's for all departments and all governments to actually activate that legislation for the favor of industry. And if we're able to do that, industry will mobilize. Something as little as a letterhead that states in there organic waste is not allowed at landfill quickly makes the industry change, quickly pushes the blame onto the producers. And again, it's not tax going to the little man, it's not tax going to the home users or the 4 to 6% of consumers that are generating waste. We're taxing the people that are producing. And we're talking agri-processing, we're talking the large producers who have the money, right? The retailers are pushing up their fees annually by 10%. So they've got the money. And it's putting the pressure on them to change. And the first 50% target should be commercial generators. And I think by doing that, everything else will then start to snowball, and it will turn into effect. Just on the digestate and registering of compost and fertilizers, it's taken over 5 years to get that passed. And there's a big bottleneck in pushing these products to market. And we're having to find loopholes and find ways of getting our products to markets. And at the moment, it is a very, very big bottleneck to the sector from growing. So I would love to speak to you afterwards about how can we streamline that.
Excellent. We'll have very soon coffee break. Just Mandisa.
Sure,
So
sure.
you are representing DBGO project, information exchange, how to bring the right information to all the people, so to have the good, let's say, knowledge available.
Absolutely. So we already have started institutionalizing the knowledge. What I think I was trying to convey earlier in my session was that the price for solar and wind has gone that low because of institutionalizing that knowledge. But they benefit because it's just like you don't pay for the inputs. But for biogas, you do pay for the input. But that is a great opportunity for localizing the benefits of biogas for the country, right? So we have to pay the price, that biogas is at, because the benefits, are a multitude compared to solar. It's easy to build because, irradiation-wise, we are at an advantage. So I think just to institutionalize that and understand that the price we have to pay to kind of benefit from this technology, and also the decommissioning and waste management for biogas compared to solar, we don't know yet how to manage, the solar panels, how do we decommission the wind farms. But for biogas, it's quite simple and straightforward. So I think just to bring up that narrative and really hyper visibly speak on exactly the potential biogas has for the country.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Definitely.
Any comments on this side of the table?
Yes, I think for me as a city, I think we should maybe look more on the benchmarking to say, as we are trying to implement this project, what has already been done, like what they've been presenting today, maybe just to go to Bio to say this is what we want to implement. So what was the pros and cons? What should we learn as a city? Like what you were saying, that in the city of Cape Town there's a project that is not working. Maybe just to get why it's not working, what should we do as a city to avoid the project not going on in a long run. And also, like, we also with the waste to energy also trying to benchmark also in Ethiopia. What did not work? What must we do differently as a city? So I think we need to benchmark and try to share this knowledge in South Africa, all of us, yeah.
Well, thank you very much. I think this was a very good session this morning where we really had an exchange of information. We brought it to the table. We also know we have to do much more with this information to spread the message wider. But I hope we can use this and, well, get something done here in the city of Joburg, get projects running so that we can indeed make this big step that also the president of the US already said that we have to do this. And I think because of climate change, there is an obligation on all of us to make this happen. Yeah, so thank you very much for all your input. Thank you very much for participating. I believe that there is now coffee outside of the room and you can continue your discussion over there. So thank you very much, everyone. Yes.